Musically.
Welcome to Relationship Soup. I am your host, Lisa Hughes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today. Of course, I have a fantastic show lined up for you on today. So I hope you all had a fantastic holiday. I hope you all are doing well. And I'm just so grateful for you all. Thank you for listening and tuning in. So today, I have a super dynamic soul with us. His name is Kevin T. Hobbs. You might have seen his face before, like he famous. He low key famous, right? He is an award-winning creative. Okay, he is an entrepreneur and an artist, right? And so today we're actually going to be talking about vulnerability and transparency in relationships, right? Of all kinds. So we're gonna cover that. So without further ado, right? Let me go and bring Kevin to the stage. Kevin, Kevin, Kevin. There he
Hey,
is. What's going on, Kevin?
I'm just good. I'm just glad to be here. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm really glad
Abs
you invited me on.
Listen, Kevin, you already knew. You already knew it was coming, right? You
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
You I gave you some time. I said, listen, I'm gonna give Kevin about a month. Then I'm gonna ask him. You gonna come holler at me because your input and we've had conversations and everything, so you already knew I wanted to share the world with you, right? Because you
Right.
be dropping some knowledge and stuff like that. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get into it. Welcome y'all. We see all of your comments. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Yes. All right. So Kevin, I
Yes.
already know all about you. So what do you want our listeners to know about Kevin T. Hobbs?
Okay, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I am a professional actor, writer, Sundance Institute trained director, and entrepreneur. I run an online acting studio called Outsiders Acting Studio at outsidersactingstudio.com, where I'm very proud of my students, some of which are featured in big productions. One of my students is one of the recurring cast members of General Hospital. I've been teaching for about 6 years. I've been acting professionally for about 11. Um, and I'm also a former educator who's certified in social emotional learning and mindfulness.
Ooh.
I still use that every day, and especially when I'm coaching my actors. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Awesome. I told y'all he dynamic, y'all. I told y'all, right? All right. So let's go on and get into it. So
Get into it.
vulnerability and transparency.
Hmm.
Okay, so first let's define these, or how would you differentiate between these, right? Because they both needed in relationships, in my opinion, of
Yeah,
all kinds, personal and professional.
yeah. So I think transparency is the act of sharing information openly and honestly, without necessarily delving into like any kind of emotional aspect.
Mhm,
And vulnerability involves revealing like your emotional state, insecurities, or fears. It allows for a deeper, more personal connection.
mhm,
So, the long and short of it is, transparency. I can give you some information, and it's information that's honest and true, but it's not necessarily information that can hurt me by
mhm,
divulging it. If I'm being vulnerable with you, I'm giving you something that you could possibly turn around and destroy me with. And I think that is the line. Yeah. In personal life, vulnerability manifests when we're sharing like our personal struggles, our fears, our trauma, with people that are close to us. But transparency, like I said, you can share details about your day, your experiences, but not expose your emotional state. And I think that's the key thing. Is your emotional state exposed?
mhm,
If it's not, you're not truly vulnerable. And if it is, then you are. And one is transparency, one is vulnerability. If we're looking at professional settings, um, transparency may involve openly communicating project updates or challenges, but vulnerability is sharing doubts and uncertainties about decisions.
mm.
So anything that exposes the emotional state, we're exposed, we're vulnerable. So that is how I differentiate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm. So let me ask you this. Do
Uh-huh.
you feel, okay, in regards to your relationships personally, let's start with personal, right? Before we get into professional. Do you feel that being transparent has hindered your relationships in any kind of way?
I think whenever we're talking about truth, right? I think it's dependent on what the truth is, right?
Mhm,
So if I can be very transparent about something that may hurt or offend the other person, then yeah, depending on where they are in their emotional maturity, yeah, that could cause problems going forward. But I think it is really down to what is the thing? What am I being transparent about? Um, I think that transparency in and of itself, it builds trust, um, and I think that transparency in like career settings enhances collaboration, and trust. I mean, you know what it is to work with someone where you keep getting surprises, and it's like, well, why didn't you tell me that we needed to hit this by this time? That would have made me a lot better off. It would have cut down on my anxiety. It would have helped me trust you more. I wouldn't feel bad, and I would feel prepared. And
mhm,
if I'm unprepared, it's really hard for me to tap into any confidence that I have. It counteracts that. So, yeah, I think transparency definitely has probably harmed me because I'm a very direct and straightforward, straight shooter.
mhm,
Um, Sometimes I can come off as intense, and sometimes it can come off as hard edge. But it's not that. I just want to get to the heart of it.
mhm,
The heart of
mhm,
the matter is, and it's not that it's rude or anything like that, but a lot of people have issues with, you look at them straight in the face and telling them, hey, this is what I think. So, you know, it's really dependent on what it is, the truth that you're sharing is, and who you're sharing it with.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now let me ask you this, okay? So I'm thinking about couples, right?
Yeah.
We, we've all probably been in some type of relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, do you have any tips on, like, for couples to create like a, if you had to say, do this to create this safe space for your significant other, or to create this environment of being able to be vulnerable and transparent?
Mhm.
Like, what tips would you say?
Okay, so I'm going to actually go back to the previous question,
Yeah, go ahead.
um,
Yeah, do
because I this kind of all intersects. Another way that transparency can cause difficulty in relationships is when it's excessive. Um,
okay. Okay.
Everything doesn't necessarily need to be shared. Um, if you overheard someone from your significant other's family saying something about them, it doesn't necessarily need to be shared. You know, if you challenge it, if you got that settled, it may be something they don't ever have to know. You know,
Mhm.
it could be maybe that person's having a bad day. Maybe, you know, they're just not feeling like themselves. If you take that back, you're being transparent, you're being truthful, you're being honest, but you're also stirring the pot. And there's no need to do that. And I think we have to consider, what are the outcomes of me sharing this? Is
Mhm.
it something that's necessary? Is it something that can be shared in a loving way? Um, I definitely think that when it comes to couples, everything's an inside job, right? Um, I think a question that needs to be asked, that everybody needs to ask themselves, is, are they emotionally intelligent?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if they
Mm.
think they're emotionally intelligent, why do you think you're emotionally intelligent? Do you reflect on yourself quite often? Are you self aware? Do you know your strengths and your weaknesses? Are you patient? Are you non judgmental?
Mhm.
And I understand it's very hard because we have these analytical judgment machines called our brains that were given to us so that we know that, okay, l- eh, last week when so and so went in the bushes, there was a tiger there and they killed him. So I'm not going to go on these bushes. So I've made a judgment and a decision about that. You can judge actions, but none of us are fit to judge people. Um, Everybody is better than the worst thing that they've ever done. And I
Mhm.
know that's a
Mhm.
hard saying, and because that has forgiveness, which is another part of emotional maturity and emotional intelligence. Do you practice forgiveness? Um,
Mm.
do you have empathy? Can you put yourself in another individual's shoes? Before you go to jump and judge them for something they did, can you step back and say, well, what's behind that behavior? One thing that I teach my kids is, we want to deal with everybody as if they're grieving from something.
Mhm.
Is that something that you can do? And if it's not something that you can do, that's fine. But what are you doing to get to the place where you can do that? Are you
Mhm.
going to therapy? And I'll be real with you. If you're black and you spent any amount of time within the framework of the Black American life, you cannot tell me that you can't benefit from sitting down with a therapist. You can't, because
Absolutely.
it's traumatic out here, like every day, right? Like
Every day.
every day. Well,
Listen.
people they wouldn't believe us if we told them. They don't. We say the same thing for years and years and years. So if that's something that you're not aware of, that you may need, is there any kind of stigma when it comes to mental health with you? Do you think that therapists are just crackpots? You
Hmm.
use throwaway terms like, oh, they're crazy. Are you able to let someone share their emotions and not take over the spot?
Whew.
So if I'm talking to you and I say, hey, listen, what you said to me made me feel like this. And
Mhm.
before I even get finished saying it, you're saying, well, I wouldn't have said that if you hadn't said that. You haven't even given me space to tell you how I feel.
Mhm. Mhm.
You are
Mhm.
now centering the discussion on you. And now the whole thing that I was talking about is gone. Or if I say something and you do let me talk, And then you turn around and say, well, that hurt my feelings. Now we're talking about your feelings. We're supposed to be talking about my feelings. We can
Mhm,
talk about your feelings, but now you've centered you when initially I was coming to you to share something with you.
mhm, mhm,
Um, Communication. Can you listen? Can you be an active listener?
mhm,
Um, we get excited. Some of us suffer from anxiety. Some of us have
mhm,
ADHD. And there are certain times where you interrupt people, and it's not necessarily because you're disrespectful. Maybe you feel like I have to get this out or else I'm going to forget it,
mhm,
right? Well, maybe you could write that down. You know what I mean? And just keep it there off to the side rather than cut this person off.
mhm.
Conversely, on the other side, can you assume positive intent?
Hmm,
So so many of us, when we feel like we've been shorted, when we feel like we've been wronged, it's always a negative thing. They did that just because that's not the way it works all the time. You have to
mhm.
give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, you were talking about patterns. We were talking about patterns earlier, right?
Oh my goodness, listen. Ugh, that's a whole
What
show in itself.
what I see a lot of is that, and I see this in personal and professional environments, is that people will completely dismiss the history that they share with a person because of one incident.
Mhm,
And it's like, but historically speaking, has this person been this way? Well, if yes, okay, I understand you feeling that way. You have to, part company, so to speak. But if no, then don't you owe them the benefit of the doubt? Because,
mhm.
you're human and you screw up too, and it happens.
Right.
Our best does not look the same every day.
Mhm, mhm,
It doesn't. It's controlled by a variety of factors. Did you get enough sleep last night? Have you got enough sleep this week? Are you eating right? Are you moving? Are you getting sunlight?
mhm, mhm,
What are you doing to help your mood stabilize? Do you pray? Do you meditate? Do you talk to friends and loved ones when you're going through something? Or do you withdraw?
mhm, mhm.
There's healing in community. Are you taking advantage of that?
That's real.
And it's very harrowing because um, so much of our experience here has been underneath a divide and conquer. Um, a divide and conquer. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, a divide and conquer method as far as controlling us, right? When
Mhm,
I say us, I'm talking about Black folks, talking about us.
mhm,
Um, you know, I, I worked at the University of Illinois, and
mhm,
I remember being in a lecture where a gentleman had followed the habits of students for 15 to 20 years. And he wanted to know why in this particular college, why Black students weren't doing as well as, say, another group of students, say like the Asian students in that particular school. This is not a general, this is very specific. But I do think that some of the information that I glean from that can be applied to that. So I've worked with a lot of foreign exchange students. And
mhm,
when the Chinese students would come over, it did not matter whether they were related or anything like that. They would be put into groups and they come over together and they studied together. They ate together. If they're going to get cell phones, one person get under their name and then they get lines for everybody else under there and they split the cost together,
mhm,
together, together, together. This might be the first time they've actually met each other. But this is we we get together and we cover the weakest link
mhm,
because we're
mhm,
stronger together. The Black students, a lot of them were afraid of being looked at as stupid or not up to task for needing help. Now, how does that translate to the stigma that's around mental health?
mhm, mhm,
I don't want to get help. I'm not crazy. That is a very unnuanced way to look at that.
mhm,
We are
mhm,
all extraordinarily complex. And a lot is said about being independent, right? I'm independent. I'm independent. I can do things by myself. I'm independent. That's
Mhm.
not the height of life. The height of life is interdependence. When I'm working on a film, if I'm working on um, a theater production, everything is about collaboration. Life really is about collaboration.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those of us that can go outside of ourselves, and this is come back to emotional maturity, can we be vulnerable and ask for help when we can't do it?
Mhm.
See, everything is all you see, Lisa. Everything,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
everything is this, right? Everything is like this. Can you ask for help? That's probably the first thing. Can you ask for help? Um, you know, I think as a society, I know as a society
Mhm.
that um, empathy is something that is lacking. You know, it's lacking. And we're going to go back into relationships now.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if
Oh
we have
yeah.
this relationship with two people, okay,
Mhm.
and oftentimes the first serious relationship that people get into, where they're in love, they are trusting someone at a level that they've never trusted anybody before.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if I share myself with you, if I'm vulnerable, if I open up and tell you about a fear, or
Mhm.
tell you that I'm doubting myself, or tell you that um, that my that I don't feel like I'm smart enough. I don't feel like I look good enough. I don't. If I tell you that stuff, how the other person handles it can mean the difference between, and it's this serious, can mean the difference between that person finding the confidence to continue to share, or that person being put in a place where they don't want to live anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's real.
That is real.
That is real. Let's look at men. We're not talking like we should. There's a reason why the suicide rates are are six times higher than
Mhm.
women.
Mhm.
You know, we're not talking. Um, Somebody asked, "Do you think men are more open to be transparent, or is it too risky?" I'll be honest with you. A lot of the stories that I get from brothers is that, listen, um, I was transparent with my woman. I said that, I don't feel like I can do A, B, C, or D. And it caused her to question whether I could be a provider or a protector.
Mhm. Mhm.
I've never not been a provider or protector, but this one moment caused her to look at me differently.
Mm. Mhm.
And listen, I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but I'm saying it's the case too many times because
Mhm.
I'm just hearing too many stories.
Hmm.
Which goes back to, are you a safe space? And how do I know if I'm a safe space? Are you emotionally intelligent?
Mhm. Mhm.
If you're not, then you have to be very real and say, I'm not a safe space. You have to look inside. There's a scripture that says, let a man examine himself, right?
Mhm.
And you have to do that. And you don't just do it one day, you do it every day.
Mhm.
Every day. Am I here in this? Am I being emotionally intelligent about this? And it's not about not having thoughts that run errant. That happens, but it's about taking those thoughts and saying, well, why do I feel that way? Is that an accurate way to feel?
Mhm. Mhm.
How about this? Let me sleep on it. Let me come
Absolutely.
back to it. Let me give myself time. Um, and if somebody says that, are you patient enough to say, okay, are you going to push to get the answer now? Because you push, you might get the answer you're not looking for.
Listen.
Right? Right?
Listen.
Tell me. Okay, well, I'm alone. You know, you know what I mean? And that's not the case. But you've already said it. You've already said it. You can't take it back. Um, so everything is like everything weaves into everything. Um,
Mhm.
the emotional intelligence factor. And just like, when I'm teaching my actors, vulnerability is very key to what we do. If you can't be vulnerable, you really can't get into the mind of the character that you're playing. If you
Mhm,
are judging the character that you're playing, you're lost. You're not the judge, you are the lawyer for the character that you're playing. So you
mhm,
can't judge them. You can't say they're one way or the other. It doesn't matter if you're playing antagonist, protagonist. It doesn't matter if you're playing Hitler. You have to be able to look at Hitler with an unbiased perspective and say, okay, well, why does he feel this way? Okay, he feels this way. You have to be able to do that. And that's why I feel like acting is not just an artistic experience, it's a spiritual experience when it's done at a high level.
mhm.
Um, it involves you having to examine yourself. It involves you having to go within. There's a colleague of mine, Jamal McNeil. He's the acting coach for Taraji Henson, for Octavia Spencer. He's Jamal knows his stuff. He said that Taraji told him, if you don't have it in your life, you're not going to be able to put it into the character.
Ooh.
And that's an assessment. Now let's transport that to the relationship. If you don't have that in yourself, you can't put it into the relationship.
Mhm,
But see, this is going to go back to that area that nobody really wants to talk about because everybody wants love. But is love
mhm,
something that you can handle?
hmm.
And is love something that you can give? Are you
Are you
jealous?
jealous?
Do you have
Do you
trust
have
issues?
trust issues?
Mhm.
You're not
You
ready.
know,
But I want love now. Yeah, but do you want love more than you don't want to hurt somebody?
Ooh. That's real. That's
Well,
real.
I didn't mean to hurt you, but were you deliberate about not hurting me?
Mhm, mhm.
Those are things you have to think about. That's a responsibility. When you're in a relationship, it's a responsibility. When somebody's vulnerable with you, that is a responsibility. It's not to be taken lightly.
Mhm,
How you
mhm.
handle that vulnerable moment can mean the difference between how their day turns out or how their life turns out. How many broken men and women do we have who wanted to be vulnerable with their parents and their parents didn't know how to handle that vulnerability?
Ooh. Listen.
I think I like I think I like boys. Get out of my
Mhm,
house. I don't like boys. I like girl. Get out of my house.
mhm,
And we can even turn it down a notch, right? Um, why did you hit mama?
mhm, 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 mhm.
I don't like when you hit mama. Shut up. Okay. And at some point, we're going to have to take hard looks at ourselves. And typically people don't like doing that. Shadow work is hard.
Oh my goodness. I did it. Yes.
Yeah. And I don't care about who's releasing the book or anything like that. It's always private. If it becomes public, it's no longer shadow work. It's not the
Mhm,
real thing.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
something that you do in private. It's something that you handle with great care, with professionals, with whoever or whatever God it is you pray to, whether you be Christian, Muslim, or whatever. It's a personal thing. And can you do that? Can you go into yourself? Can you say, I'm not ready? Or does that woman look too good?
Hmm.
Emotional intelligence is not a fake it till you make it. It's not. If you don't have it and you get into a relationship requires too much from you. It requires too much. And if you're deficient in any one of those areas, it's going to be exploited. And it being exploited not only can cause damage to the other person, but can cause damage to you.
Absolutely.
You may really love that individual, but because you didn't take care with that part of you that was deficient, now that individual can no longer trust you. And now you've taken the person that you love more than anything, and you've made yourself a pariah to them.
Mm, mm. That's very true.
Yeah. Um, one thing with couples, open communication is always key. Um, you discuss your comfort levels. You got to find your boundaries. You got to find common ground. That's another thing. Do you know what your boundaries are?
Mhm, mhm,
Because if you don't know what your boundaries are, then how can you expect someone to fit inside of something that you don't know what it is? So you're
mm,
constantly disappointed. And you're disappointed because happiness is a function of expectation. And what is your expectation? If you don't know what it is you want, how can somebody give you what you want? This and you're just in circles. Um, those are things that have to be discussed. Somebody just commented about people function in conditional love and not unconditional.
mhm.
I'm not going to say that everything should be unconditional love. I
Hmm,
think we've lost too many women to unconditional love. And I can say that because I worked in mental health. I worked with kids from questionable backgrounds have been abused. I work with battered women.
mhm.
And it takes a battered woman on an average 6 times before she can walk away from a abusive relationship. 6.
Mhm, mhm,
That
mhm.
tells me that there's some unconditional love there. But you know what tends to happen? A lot don't make it to 6. They die.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
So I'm not so sure the conditional love is the issue because when we come into a relationship, we have boundaries. Listen, these are my boundaries. If you do not respect my boundaries, then we can't work. I think the issue is that love is seen a lot as transactional. And I think that is where we run into things. Oh, well,
Mhm,
I
mm.
gave you this, so I'm expecting that. It's like, so did you do it because you love me or did you do it because you wanted something from me? It, it can't be both. It
That's
just
real.
can't. And I think when we begin to look at someone seriously, and if the first thing that you're thinking about is, well, what can this person do for me? You lost.
Mm,
One of my mentors is an Academy Award winning, or Academy Award nominated screenwriter. And he was like, when do you network? When do you reach out and network to someone?
mhm, mhm.
And I was like, I mean, when you meet them, no, you don't network until you can offer them a solution to a problem.
Mm,
If you can't do that, then everything will be superficial. So if we looked at how can I enhance the life of this person? How can I help this person? How can I be a blessing to this person? What can I give to this person? Right. And then
mhm.
we can look at, well, do they have this part of emotional intelligence? They have that part. But if you can't do that, then guess what? You're not ready for a relationship because a relationship shows us more about ourselves than it does about the other person.
I was just saying that the other day. I literally was having that conversation the other day. Absolutely, it does.
So if you're talking about a previous relationship and it's this person, that person, they did this. Yeah, but what did you do?
Absolutely.
How did you contribute? Because that person's gone. Now you're just left with yourself. And if you haven't changed anything, then the same issues that you had in that relationship are going to carry on to the next one. Well, how do you know I had issues? Because you're human.
Mhm, mhm.
Because you're human. Because you're flawed. You screw up. You've had some bad days in that relationship. But were you able to learn from that? What did you learn from the relationship? I ain't learned nothing. Well, you wasn't listening. Because maybe you're thinking, I didn't learn anything from them. But what did you learn about yourself?
Sometimes that's what it is. That's what the lesson is. What
That's,
did you learn
that's
about
what it
yourself?
is every time. That is what it is every time. And people have got to stop looking at relationships as a complete waste because they didn't get something that they wanted.
Mm, mm, mm.
What did you learn about yourself? Did you learn what you can put up with? Did you learn what you couldn't put up with? Did you feel like there are certain things that you could deal with at the beginning that you realize it's not? Because how many times do boundaries kind of change? They do, because people grow. So there seems to be this misconception about relationships and marriage, where you're supposed to be happy all the time. If you're not happy all the time, that's not a
It's
loving
trash.
relationship.
It's trash if you're not happy all the time.
I got options. Maybe you don't. You know what I mean? It's cold out there, and people focus
Listen.
on what they want, but not what they could end up with.
Mhm.
And so I'm not saying unconditional love per se, if that's hurting you, if the relationship is causing you damage. But what I'm saying is, why aren't you happy? Because happiness is an inside job. It is not the other person's responsibility to make you happy.
Thank you so much for saying that. You
You're
compliment.
supposed to, right. You're supposed to have happiness and bring it, and you share that stuff. Now you
Absolutely.
got your happiness and their happiness is mixed up. So if you're not happy, why are you looking outward first instead of looking inward?
Mhm, mhm.
Now, sometimes it is outward, right?
That's
Abuse
true.
is, it's hard to be happy with abuse, right? It's hard to be happy with lack of empathy.
Mhm.
But typically, we look to other people to provide pieces for us that we have to supply ourselves.
Yes,
And if you're not happy, how is your lack of happiness affecting the other person in the relationship?
that's true.
Are you expecting them to just make you happy? Like, they're not there to make you happy. They're there to be supportive. They're there to walk through life with you. They're
Mhm.
there for you to lean on. They're there to, if you have 70 and they got that 30, or vice versa, that's what they're there for. They're not there. They don't simply exist just to make you happy.
Exactly. That's a lot of pressure to put on somebody anyway.
Man,
You gotta
listen.
make me happy. You gotta, and that's one thing that I say, like, when I have conversations, is like, yo, no, you can't make me happy. I can't make you happy. We have to complement each other's happy. Like, we already need to be coming into this situation with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Here's another one. Can you say you're sorry?
Ooh, ooh.
No, no, no. Let me phrase that. Can you say you're sorry and mean it? Because
And
go
no, no,
ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because we a lot of us become okay at throwing that out there. I'm sorry. Or do you throw sorry with a disclaimer? I'm
Like,
sorry,
I'm
but the
sorry.
only reason I did that. Right. No,
Yeah,
no, no.
I'm sorry that you got your feelings hurt when I
Right.
cussed you. I just feel like if you
Exactly.
wasn't so hypersensitive, then you
Exactly.
would be feeling that way. So I'm sorry for you feeling that. It's like, bro, you might as well kept that.
Right. And you
Exactly.
do that, and you don't want to get to that point in the relationship where you're sorry doesn't mean anything.
Ooh,
Because when you're sorry doesn't mean anything because you've consistently done the same thing over and over again, you're kind of at the point of no return there.
definitely.
Because, you know, if you've said sorry that many times, then you've also had time to change and rectify the behavior.
Mhm,
And accountability is a part of emotional intelligence.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
And a lot of times people have issues with being transparent because they have issues being accountable. Well, I cheated. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want you to leave me. That's tough. That's what happens. I can respect you more if you tell me, yeah, I did that. And I'm sorry. I understand if you don't want to be okay. All right, bye. Then keeping it from the person. And now we're manipulating.
Mhm, mhm,
And we're
mhm.
manipulating like that, then we got gaslighting. And when we're manipulating gaslighting, now we're emotionally abusing that other individual.
That's true.
Can you not deny the reality of your partner? You hurt my feelings. Well, I don't think I did. No, no, no. That's not how that goes. That's not how that goes.
Like, say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
If you have a headache, I've had a headache before, but I don't know how your headache feels. I can't tell you that it's not as bad or as bad as you say. I can't tell you that.
Mhm,
If
mhm,
if I tell you that I feel wronged or that you wronged me in some way, shape, or form, you just dismiss it because no, I didn't mean to do that, so that's why I didn't. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, are you going to listen? And once you see what you have wrought, can you take accountability for it? Accountability is more than just saying I'm sorry.
absolutely.
If you
Absolutely.
broke trust, can you reestablish trust? Well, what does that mean? Do you have the stamina to work with the other person and establish an extended period of time where you haven't done anything like that?
Hmm,
If they're going
hmm,
to, what we find is that people are okay with being wrong. They're okay with hurting people. They're not okay with being a part of the healing process because that's the real work.
mhm, mhm.
That is the some days you're gonna be mad at me because of what I did, but I'm gonna let you have that. It's not like you're being abusive to me, but you might not want to see me, but you
Mm,
love me. You understand that I'm working through it. Every day there's not going to be a sunny day. They want you to get over it, which is a
mhm.
lack of empathy, it's a lack of patience, it's judgmental. It is one of the worst things that anybody can do to anyone, cause a great deal of pain, and give them a timeline for when they get over it.
You should be over this by now. That happened 2 years ago. Listen, listen. You don't get to determine when I heal from that. You don't get to determine when I build the foundation up from that, right? You should
Right.
stick to what it is that you need to do so that you can help to facilitate, although it is up to me, but still, the person that does the offense does not have the right to determine that timetable. They don't.
Right. So trauma is not in the event.
Mhm.
Trauma is never in the event. Trauma is in us.
Hmm.
It lodges in our body. And depending on how bad the trauma is, it can take a while. It can take a while. We might be fine for a week, and then the wind might blow and make us feel the hurt again. Um, so it takes a minute for people to get through that. And so empathy comes in when we realize that we don't want to put someone that we love in a position to where they're hurt, and because of that hurt they're deficient
Mhm.
in their everyday life. Life is already going to throw a lot of difficult things at you. Somebody said grief doesn't have a timeline, and it's not linear either, right? It's not linear either.
Absolutely.
um you know I have had 7 deaths in the last 12 months.
Hmm.
7 and most of the time I'm fine, but I might wake up in the morning and I'm crying.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
That's just how it is. Now,
By
at what
death,
stage of acceptance? Yeah, go ahead.
do you mean like physical death? Like, or are you speaking on death on every level? Because I'll be thinking deep.
Mhm, all right. I'm talking
Talking about,
about, so I see what you're getting at.
see
Yeah,
what you.
so I'm talking about physical death for sure.
Okay, okay.
But definitely there was death in some relationships, right?
Mhm,
And so when someone hurts you that you're with, that's the death of that relationship as it was.
mhm, mhm,
Does it
mhm.
mean that it can't be restored or even made better in the future? No. But everything has changed. It's changed from that moment. It has changed. Um, and listen, if it is abuse, um, and I don't want to use abuse as kind of like a catch-all term. And one thing I don't want to get into is ranking abuse, right? Um, I do know that a, a lot of people gaslight, and they may not be aware that they're gaslighting because they were
Mhm.
raised by people that gaslight. Um, in that regard, is there some sort of benefit of the doubt? Can you assume positive intent? Because everybody, I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna tell this story, okay?
Mhm, mhm,
So there was a bird. The bird flew to the ground to get this worm, okay? And the bird was struggling with this worm, trying to get it out of the hole, and the seasons changed. And the bird froze, okay? A dog comes by and poops on the bird, all right?
mhm, mhm.
Begins to thaw the bird out. The bird starts to sing for help. Then a cat comes up, digs him out, and then eats him. Okay. What's the moral? Well, everybody that shits on you is not your enemy. And everybody that pulls you out of shit is not your friend.
You hear me? Woo!
So the emotional intelligence comes in with, let's weigh what's done versus the the history of this person. Okay. Has this person done this repeatedly over an extended period of time?
Mhm,
If
mhm,
no, okay, let's look at the behavior. What's going on? What's going on? And it doesn't mean that you can do this by yourself. Therapy, therapy, therapy.
hmm.
And if you haven't addressed some issues in one-on-one therapy, then they can't be addressed in couple counseling. That's not fair.
Whew.
That's not fair. It's not fair to the other person. Um, you have to work on that aspect. And then your couples counseling needs to be about the relationship, right? So the relationship, the counseling for the couples cannot take on this monstrosity where we're coming in for couples counseling and we're only talking about one person's issues.
Hmm. Listen,
But are you emotionally mature enough to recognize that? And these are questions that you have to ask yourself every day.
that makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Now, Kevin, we do have some questions from our listeners, okay? So I'm gonna scroll up a little bit. We ain't ignoring y'all. This conversation is just flowing. You hear me? Okay, so someone has a question directly for you, and it says right here, they want to know, did you have a strong father figure?
I did, but it was my
Hmm.
it was my uncle Ike, and he passed in May.
Mm,
But he was a strong father figure. But um, he was also very progressive, and he saw the world a little bit different.
mhm,
Um, th- this is a favorite story about my uncle. When my cousin was little, he took her to McDonald's,
mhm,
and she was like, "I want the Happy Meal with the car," right? And so he's like, "Give me the Happy Meal for the boy." And she was like, "Well," the lady kind of was like, "Well, she's a girl." He's like, "I don't give a give me the give me the Happy Meal for the boy." That's that's my uncle. That's how he was, and pretty much everything I knew and know about being a father and being an artist
mhm.
um, and being a man, um, I got from him. So that was my strong father figure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. So we talked about patterns before the show, right?
We did.
And then you so eloquently put it together with actually learning about yourself. Like, what lessons did you learn from that relationship about yourself?
Right.
Do you think that is key to not repeating patterns? Because see, that's I told you I don't want to concentrate on what I don't want, right?
Hmm.
But do you think that if you learn more about yourself, then that will help you not to repeat those patterns? If you learn
It
the lesson
should.
from the last relationship.
It should. Um, it doesn't always work out that way, but yes, it should, because typically when we fall into patterns, it's because we're not really paying attention.
Hmm.
We're not being deliberate, and a lot of us enter into relationships, and after the first, 2 or 3 months or the year, we're no longer deliberate. Do you know that the the brain that's in love is not dissimilar from the brain that's on cocaine?
Say what?
Brain that's in love, not chemically dissimilar, not very dissimilar from the brain that's on cocaine.
Mhm,
Case in point, you ever had a friend and you're like, why are you with this person? And no, and this friend has always been level-headed and always like taking good advice, but they just seem different. You can't get through to them. And then after about 6 months to a year, the high wears off. And then now they're kind of listening to you.
hmm.
And what can save us from that? Because falling in love is a very powerful thing.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of people say, well, it's a good thing. I'm not so sure. I think it's a thing. And I
Hmm.
think that it has double-edged blade. Falling in love can be great with the right person. Falling in love could be death with the wrong person, right? Um, and you have to be able to take things slow. You gotta know what's too fast for you and
Mhm.
what's not too fast for you. And so often we just move with the feeling.
We do.
You can't. There's things you gotta consider, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you, I'm not gonna use money. I'm gonna use something different. Everybody uses money. That's
Yeah, right.
old and played out. Okay. If you have always wanted to live in the country,
Mhm, mhm.
but the guy you're with wants to stay in the city, and he's resolute in that, it doesn't matter how good you feel when he's laying the wood. You're not going to get to where you want to go. So before we even went there, before you even fell in, you could have used that analytical part. Yeah, we just don't want the same things.
Hmm.
And it takes more than love. It takes a lot more than love. Love has to be present, but it takes more than love. There may be periods where the love is just not working there, but do you have loyalty?
You ooh,
Do you have integrity? Do you have
absolutely.
respect?
Absolutely.
Do you have imagination? Because a lot of times people, I've fallen out of love with this person. Well, what have you tried to fall back in love?
Mhm. Mhm.
This may not be a them problem. This might be a you problem. Have you looked at it that way? Are you consistently harping on the things that you don't like? Or have you weighed that against the things that you do? Because people have a tendency to remember the negative stuff a lot more than the positive stuff.
That
And
makes
they'll use
sense.
that and create a narrative, and they'll start making decisions, like life decisions on that narrative, and it ain't right.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
come back, I never should have left you. It's like, well, it's too late now.
Okay.
I don't wanna miss anybody's question.
Okay. No, you're fine. I have another question after this. Did an event or relationship help Kevin notice his patterns? If so, how and when did he decide to pivot?
Ooh,
Ooh, okay, Leah.
ooh. So I was a single father. Yeah, my two oldest kids who are 24 and 20 now, I raised them by myself. I grew up in a household that was abusive. Um, Not my uncle. He lived in a different state. But I grew up in a household that was abusive. I'm a survivor of child abuse. When my kids came, I was very young. Like I tell my son, you're older than I was when you were born. It just blows his mind. But I knew that what I went through, I didn't want my kids to have to go through. And so it made me very cognizant of, well, how have I been affected by the upbringing I had? And when that happened, I just started really becoming reflective on how I saw parenting, how I saw the world, how I saw women, because I was raising a little girl. That was my pivot point. Parenthood, um, in a lot of ways, saved me. Parenthood allowed me to be in a position where it's like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to try to, figure it out. And I went about 7, 8 years trying to figure things out by myself. And then I finally said, you know what? I've done okay thus far, but I want to really get down to the root of things because there's definitely some things that are going to be in me and I don't want them to come out. I want them to spill over the people that I love. Right. So I went to therapy. I'm still in therapy. Been in therapy 15 years.
Mhm.
Um, I credit it with saving my life. I credit it with helping me shape the man that I am today, and I credit it with helping me have the skills and the tools that were needed to make sure that my kids didn't die. And not only did they not die, but that they thrive.
All right.
So that was my pivot point.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
We have one more question before we close. This has been a great conversation.
great.
Okay, so this question is, can people in relationships, marriages really have friends of the opposite sex and not be labeled as a toxic type? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So here's the thing: if you have friends of the opposite sex and you want to maintain those friends of the opposite sex, then get with somebody that's okay with that.
Find your person. Find
That's
your person.
I'm not going to say that something's toxic or something can't be a certain way. I will say that I will hear a lot of men, I'm going to say, I hear a lot of men that'll say, well, you can't be just platonic friends with a woman. Typically, those are men that cannot be platonic friends with a woman. There are men that can, that look at women and see an individual, not something to be conquered. And if you have men that feel that way, they are misogynistic and they need to work on themselves because that's not what women are. If you have men that don't look at women as just masturbation toys, then it's very likely that they can. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, but if someone has a boundary, well, listen, I'm not cool with that. And you want to have that lifestyle, stop looking past that. It's not going to work. It's not
Absolutely.
going to work. It's going to cause you damage. It's going to cause the other person damage. I'm not saying that the other person is immature or anything like that. Some people just like what they like, and some people just don't like what they don't like.
Mhm, mhm.
Stop trying to make people fit into your little boundaries, and they're not suited for it. You could
Absolutely.
you know, stop putting, square pegs in a round hole. And then you wonder why it didn't work. Yeah, and this other person, they were too jealous, and you knew that they were not cool with that. So why did you even walk down that road? Oh well, he took me places. That's not enough. You have to look at the long game, and that's what
We both
relationships
like
are.
scary movies,
You're
so
looking
that's
at
why.
the long game. Yeah, yeah, right. Well, it's so good I couldn't let him go. No, that is you're feeling some sort of empty hole in yourself. You need to work on that. Yeah,
That's real. That's real. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Great conversation. Thanks for the conversation. Great topic. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Kevin,
yes.
tell the masses where they can find you.
So you can find me on Instagram or TikTok as Kevin T. Hobbs. I want to
Mhm.
keep it simple. Everything that I'm involved in is going to be there, from my acting studio to the independent film I'm putting together. Everything is going to be there. So just look for Kevin T. Hobbs on Instagram. You'll find links to everything.
Okay.
Oh, also, you can catch me in Southside on Max season 3, co-starring the role that season. So you can catch me there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted you to plug that. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
know he famous, y'all. Kevin, I'm gonna get your autograph. So,
And
I
there'll be
know.
more now. The strike's over. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Do you have any like words of wisdom that you want to leave with our listeners? Look, before I get into my little spiel.
um, yeah. Be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Don't sugarcoat it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Get with yourself and be ruthlessly honest. If you're a scoundrel, you need to be real with yourself. You're a scoundrel. Well, how do we not be a scoundrel? Okay, now we can work with something.
Hmm.
Once you've acknowledged that, then now you're reflecting. Now, once you make the decision that you don't want to be that way anymore, now you're putting things into action. Um, and then when you start doing things like talking to therapists, like talking to people that know you, hey, have I ever hurt you in some sort of way? How was it? How did that make you feel?
Hmm.
We like to set bombs off and walk away like the movies, right? But that's not how life is. We set bombs off and we see all of the damage, and you can't just walk away from it. You got to at least help clean it up if you can. So we get to that point by being very honest with ourselves.
Hmm.
And before you start telling anybody else what they need to change, have you told yourself what you need to change?
That's real. That's real. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you all for listening. Like my mama told me, you better shout me out. Mommy, thank you for listening. Right. Thanks to my Aunt Anna, everybody, right? I'll be trying to shout everybody out. Maurice, Leah, Tammy, Anthony. It's so many people listening tonight, and we really appreciate all of the support. Um, y'all not following Relationship Soup by now. Y'all tripping, right? So if you have not done so, please subscribe and follow us on the following platforms. YouTube is Relationship Soup, period. You got to put the period on it, right?
Yeah.
And then on Facebook, it's just Relationship Soup Group. Come join us. We are 25K strong. Come join us. Join the conversation, okay? And last words I have, just love yourself, right? Love yourself. And again, thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week, same time, same channel. And Kevin, I'm gonna post your information so that people can find you. Listen, if they
All
in
right.
the area, what if they want to be an actor or actress or a thespian, right? Isn't it called a
Yeah.
thespian, right?
That's
They need
yeah,
you to
you,
come to
you're
the
usually
studio.
is an actor, but yeah, I can teach you. I'm a good teacher. Check my
Oh, really?
references. I have
Okay.
I have the most sought after acting coach in the world.
Woo! Y'all hear
And
that?
you can come to me and I can teach you the ways. So yeah.
Listen, I might have to holler at you, Kevin, add some to my resume because I'm a fellow thespian myself. I've
All
been in a
right.
couple.
Hey, listen. Hey,
Hey, I was
listen.
even a
I,
gospel video vixen, okay?
one of my students made their off Broadway debut this past year. Another one booked 3 straight shows at the Black Ensemble Theater in Chicago. And like I said, one is on General Hospital. Uh, Arlandria Linier. She plays
Woo.
Nika in General Hospital. But yeah, I can put you to work and I can show you how to do it.
Hey, let's do it. Let's work. All right. Well, thank y'all. Love you and see you next week.